So thank you very much for joining. Today we are going to talk about the structure of our FIP project, the FIP report. And we are going to discuss various sections of the report and few things that students usually ignore. So let me share the screen with you guys. All right. So what makes an impressive FIP document or FIP report? So first of all, I would like to uh, discuss this disclaimer because the guidelines that are going to be discussed in this presentation may differ from those available elsewhere, as there is no standard for writing an FIP report, right? So moving on, here are the contents. We are going to discuss typical sections of an FIP report, then we are going to um, discuss some important consideration, and towards the end of the presentation, I'll talk about the plagiarism and its consequences. So let's begin with the very first section. It's uh, the typical contents of an FIP report. So I'll discuss all these one by one and how you should prepare these for your report. So first of all, let's begin with the title page. Seems very simple, like, okay, every report has a title page, so there is nothing important about that. But the point is, a lot of students make mistakes while designing the title page. For instance, they will have you know uh, their own customized title page, which is not the right way of doing it. Rather, university provides a template for the title page or the entire document. Of course, you have to follow the title page exactly as it appears in the template. Usually the templates are available on the university's websites, and you have to select the title of your project very carefully, right? Sometimes with the help of your supervisor, you have to reword it so that it looks professional and it does not have any grammatical mistakes, right? The second section is acknowledgements, and let's see what appears in the acknowledgements. Usually, I have seen students put their supervisor's name in the acknowledgement section, right, along with others, which should not be the case. You don't have to thank your professor. Rather, his or her name is going to be appearing on the title of the on the title page of the project, right? So in the acknowledgement section, you have to thank others, right? And who that person or those person can be anyone other than your supervisor who helped you, right? So it can be other professors, it can be lab staff, maybe if you're developing something, or maybe you had a hardware component that you were designing in a specific lab. Uh, and it can be your friends, your fellow students, your family members. And if you have got funding from some agency or your university, then you have to thank that organization as well, right? And once again, you don't have to mention the professor name in the acknowledgement section. Then we move to the next section, that is dedication. So you have to dedicate your project to someone, but this section is optional. Usually people dedicate their projects to their parents, kids, spouse, professors. Sometimes they have something uh, religious, for instance, dedicating your project to Almighty Allah, right? That is perfectly fine. So the next important section is the abstract, right? So once again, the very common mistake that students make is writing the abstract in the start of the project, right? Um, so the reason is why should you should not do that, because in the very beginning, you don't know what results you're going to achieve, right? So or maybe did you face any limitations during project? If you were doing something to achieve better accuracy, then what was that accuracy in solving a problem, right? You don't know those parameters. So it's a better idea to write the abstract when you're about to finish your research, right? When you're about to, complete your project. It should not contain any references. So of course we encourage that if you're taking some information from any other sources, you have to provide a reference, but in the abstract section, it's not recommended. You can mention something like this, that the existing research suggests that, XYZ, parameters can contribute towards the better accuracy or efficiency of something. But you cannot provide the names or the references of the research papers in this section. And what should appear in the abstract? So that is a very common question that many students ask me. So first of all, you have to introduce an area. For instance, you were working in any area, let's suppose mobile applications for a certain domain, then you have to first of all talk about that area. So for instance, if someone was working on a web application that is related to medical domain, or for instance, agriculture, so you have to talk about what specific problem or area you are targeting, right? Then you have to highlight the problem, like what is the problem that you're going to focus. Then you have to talk about the existing solutions, uh, and you have to mention their limitations. Then you have to talk about your approach for solving that specific problem. And towards the end, you have to talk about the results that you achieved, and if there were any contributions, right? So if you see, all this have to appear in one paragraph, and one or two paragraphs, and that is usually a page, or in very few cases it's like more than a page. So that is why it's called abstract. You don't have to provide any details, but your abstract should cover all these things, right? So moving on, we have uh, just give me a second. Okay, we have the introduction chapter. So once again, I have listed 7 chapters here, but as I said in the very beginning, it's not necessary to have all these chapters. You may have less chapters, you may have more chapters. So this is just a recommended pattern. This is not something that you must follow, right? So what should appear in the introduction chapter, right? So I have included few things, but of course you can add more things, or you can maybe take out some things, a few things if you think they are not important and they should appear elsewhere, right? So of course, the title of the chapter is introduction. So we have to introduce all the basic terminologies that we are going to use, and we have to define various things. Then we have to state our hypothesis, that um, it's a statement which can be true or false. That is why it's called hypothesis, right? So the closest word in Urdu for this is mafruza, right? हम कोई चीज फर्ज कर रहे होते हैं, ठीक है? So in hypothesis, we have to state something, that by applying such and such techniques, we can achieve improvement or accuracy or efficiency in solving XYZ sort of problem, right? So that may or may not be true, and that would basically be determined when you achieve your results, whether your hypothesis was true or false, right? Then, of course, we have a problem statement. The problem that you're going to solve, you should know very clearly, like which problem you're going to focus. Most of the times when students write the problem statement, they have long paragraphs or the entire page, and they are talking about so many things there, and they are not very focused on the problem itself, right? So when you're writing the problem statement, be very sure about it, that you're targeting the problem, right? You're not adding unnecessary details. And later you have to explain the problem. you have to talk about the limitation of the existing solutions in details. Then it's very important to list your project objectives. It's a very important section, because towards the end of your document, that is the conclusion chapter, for instance, you will talk about those objectives. If you have 3 objectives, for instance, you will list how many objectives were achieved, whether you were able to achieve all 3 of them, or maybe you achieved 2 of them fully, but one objective was fulfilled partially. So they should not be, I mean, confusing. They should not be overlapping, right? They should be very precisely written, right? And if you have 3 objectives, then you should know them on fingertips, that what you are going to achieve in your project or what your intentions are. If you have 4 objectives, you should know like what those objectives are and how they differ from each other. They should not be overlapping. Once again, I'm emphasizing these points. Sometimes we have seen that students just sometimes change the wording, but they are talking about the same thing in 2 objectives, right? Then it's very important to understand what the scope of the project is, right? So which means the features that you're going to complete are going to be included in the scope of your project, and the features that are not going to be completed are going to be part of your future work, right? So sometimes students begin with a very expanded or large scope of the project, but they are not able to complete that. So having a project which has I think we talked about it, which has a lot of incomplete features would be a bad idea. Rather, a project which has fewer features, but all of those features are working completely fine, that will be a better idea, better project, right? And also in this chapter, you should mention what are going to be the benefits of your project, right? How it is going to make the life of other people or the people who are going to use it better, right? And also called the impact, right? So impact of your project, right? Of course, we are, we don't build anything that's not going to benefit anyone or does not have a positive impact, right? So moving on, we have the next section, that is the background or the literature review or related work. You can have, all these names. Of course, you have to choose one of these, but of course, um, these all can represent the same thing. So, of course, over here, you have to mention various studies that have been done previously, right? So they can be research papers, they can be some projects that have been done previously by other students or by other students of other universities or anywhere in the world. So I have seen that people make a lot of mistakes here, not only undergrad students, but also the master's level students, right? Because they summarize other studies or projects that have been completed, but what they miss is like, why are they mentioning that in their documentation, right? So I have suggested 3 things that should be provided for every study that you're going to include in this section. That is, number 1, you have to summarize their work, and you have to mention the relevance, right? Now, it's very important to understand what the relevance is, right? And relevance could be that you are inspired by their methodology and you're going to use the same methodology in your project, right? That is one relevance. Sometimes the relevance can also mean that you found that their methodology was not up to the mark, and you're improving on top of that, and you're making a point that although these researchers have used these techniques, but I don't think so these techniques are going to help a lot, so we have improved the methodology and we are coming with something better, right? um, Sometimes maybe you talk about the data that they used. It was a data set maybe that was publicly available, and you used the data set to you know um, use the same data set because it was publicly available. It was accepted by the research community, and you decided to use the same data set, right? And of course, we have to provide the reference for each included study, right? And one thing that's important is how many related papers should be discussed in this chapter, right? Or maybe if you have like hundreds of studies, it's not important to include all those studies in your related work section, because in that case your chapter may be like up to maybe 30, 40, or 50 pages long. If you're including maybe a half page for each study and you're including 50 studies, of course it's going to be 25. If you're going to include like 100 related studies, it's going to be 50 pages. Then that is a bit too much, right? So you have to develop an exclusion criteria. You have to filter these studies. So you have to only include the most important or most relevant studies, right? And if you need further guidelines about the exclusion criteria, we can talk about that sometime later, right? And you have to provide the reference for everything that is not your contribution, right? This is very important. So if you are including something that has been done by someone else, if you are including even a definition, so you have to cite the source for that, right? If you got that definition from, for instance, Wikipedia, you have to provide the link for Wikipedia. If you got it from a book, you have to provide the reference for a book, right? And if you have got that from a research paper, you have to provide the reference to the research paper. Now, the next important thing is paraphrasing, right? So you don't have to just copy and paste, rather you have to paraphrase that, which means writing something in your own words. And it's very important, right? To explain everything in your own words. So moving on. So we have another important chapter, that is the proposed work and the proposed solution, or the architecture of the proposed system. So you can have different names for this, but of course that doesn't matter. Basically, you have to talk about something that you're developing, right? It can be a device, it can be a software application, it can be anything, right? So what are the important considerations? First of all, you should start with a very high level diagram. If it is a hardware component, you should provide a high level circuit diagram. If it is a software application, you have to provide a high level architecture diagram of the system. Then you have to explain all the modules or subsystems in detail. And if there are some standards that exist there, you have to make sure that you're following those standards. For instance, if you're developing a web application, so you must know that a three-layer architecture exists there, and you should follow that. Rather, you must follow that three-layered architecture for your web application, right? Similarly, of course, then you have to explain all the modules, the working of your project. So these are some of the most important things that I have included. Of course, you can add more details in this chapter. Now, moving on to the next chapter, that is tools. And of course, I have made it very clear that this is an optional chapter. So I'll define why it is an optional chapter and why it can be included as a chapter as well, right? So first of all, you have to answer this question: how many or tools did you basically develop or use? Just give me a second, please. All right, sorry for that. So first of all, we have to answer this question that how many tools are you using or you have developed? So in some of the projects, The requirement could be that there are, several tools that you're working on to get your objectives met. So in those situations, we can have a dedicated chapter. For instance, if you have like five, six, seven different tools that you have worked on, so you have to provide a description for all those tools. You have to maybe briefly list their features. So this alone would be, five, six pages. So you can include this as a separate chapters. I've seen in some cases that people include unnecessary screenshots, right? So a screenshot that is the starting screen of a tool, for instance. It's not, displaying anything special. It's not conveying any message, but it's just a blank screenshot, right? A blank screenshot means you're not processing anything on the tool, but it's just the front end of the very first, like when you start the tool. I think you got my point. So that is something absolutely unnecessary. So you have to provide these screenshots, but there are justifications for that. And you also have to specify what alternatives did you have and why did you choose a specific tool. So for instance, if you were going to create a database, so you can mention we had XYZ choices, but we went for choice X because it has these benefits over the others, right? If you were using a machine learning, let's suppose, project, you have to specify what tools were available and why did you choose a specific project, a specific tool, right? If you are using a network simulator, then of course you can talk about different simulators that are available. Then you have to talk about why did you choose a specific simulators, right? And of course, as I told you, you can also include them as a chapter. So it can either appear towards the end of your experiment chapter, right? Or maybe somewhere towards the end of your proposed solution chapter, right? It depends. So moving on, we have the experiments or case study or evaluation. So these can be the possible titles of this chapter, but of course they are going to talk about the same thing. So by experiments, if of course uh, you develop something in which you are supposed to perform some experiments, of course you have to name it as experiment. But in some cases we have proposed something that is that involves a lot of theoretical concepts, but we do a small scale case study as a proof of concept, right? So we can we can run large scale studies, of course, that are going to take a lot of time. Maybe we are not able to do that, but we run a small scale experiment that is called a case study, right? In some cases we call it evaluation, right? Evaluation of the system. So first of all, you should have experiment design that is basically clearly stated steps. You have to come up with, for instance, a flow chart, like how the experiment is going to be done, right? And you can relate it to the objectives. For instance, if you have multiple objectives stated, then you have to maybe relate it for achieving the first objective. Maybe that is the comparison of your tool with the existing tools to see if your tool works better than the previous ones. So you can relate this experiment to that achievement of that objective, right? And you have to make sure that your experiments are reproducible. So what if I want to repeat the experiments you did after 1 year or 2 years or any amount of time? So I just want to make sure whether you actually did something or your results are fabricated, right? Just want to confirm, right? So in that case, it's very important to understand that you have to provide all possible details, like which specific version of the tool did you use? If you configured the tool and you provided some configuration parameters, what were those configuration parameters? For instance, if someone is using a network simulator, which is generating packets, so you have to specify all the parameters that you used, So if someone else wants to redo the experiment or reproduce the results, they should be able to do that, right? So you have to provide all possible details. And here is a good point, that you can include the screenshots. Okay, we have provided all these parameters and the configuration looks like this. And you can include a very informative screenshot over there, right? And similarly, towards the end of this chapter, you have to provide the limitations of your experiments, right? So for instance, if I'm using a simulator, I should explain that we got this results by using XYZ simulator, but the results on the actual system may differ, right? Actual network may differ, right? So, all right, moving on, we have results and discussion chapter. So first of all, how to represent your results. So of course, we have several ways. We can create tables, we can create charts. So you have to be very careful about it. Like you have to discuss it with your supervisor or professor, like which charts or which graphs are suitable for your data, right? Sometimes presenting raw data in tables, you may have very clear idea about it, but for others, it may be a bit problematic to understand what those results mean, right? So you have to also discuss what your results reflect. For instance, if you are getting higher values in column 2 of your table, so what does it reflect, right? You don't just have to let it be there, sitting there without any explanation. That will be something really bad. You have to explain what each result reflect. And over here, it's very important to see if your objectives have been achieved, right? So what if the results suggest something that is not in accordance with your hypothesis? So that is something that may happen. It's not something bad, right? It's not something embarrassing, but it shows something that you thought that some few things like work in one way, but you found that they don't work in that way, but rather they work in another way, right? So let me give you an example. So one of our students was working on her master's thesis, and she decided to apply a certain technique on a certain algorithm on a certain type of data that was text-based data. And later she found that the algorithm that she was using is not best suited for text data, rather it's best suited for image data, right? So her results were not up to the mark, but she came up with a finding that this algorithm is not best suited for the textual data, rather it's best suited for the image data, right? So that was a finding, right? It's something like this. The guy who invented the light bulb, he, in the end, he said, I found like 1,000 ways that don't work, right? In some of the cases, your finding may reflect something you did not anticipate, right? But it's perfectly fine. You have to present it in a good way, right? And never fabricate the results. Fabricating the results means you are coming up with your own values, that we achieve 90% accuracy and we achieve this and that, so without doing the real experiments. It's something really bad. It's of course going to have a negative impact whenever it's discovered that you have given fabricated results. So moving on, we have conclusion and future work. So in this section, you have to, for conclusion especially, you have to see, okay, we have some questions as well. So let's hold on for a second and let me finish this. I'll definitely come back to your questions in detail. So what are the implications of the results? Now we have achieved these results. So what do they mean, right? Where then they can be implemented, right? Who can they benefit, right? So can your project be extended to solve some other sort of problem, right? Because you have to be very creative here, right? So you have to think about all possible scenarios in which your project can benefit people, right? And of course, whatever was not in the scope of your project becomes the future work, right? So when you're developing, you are thinking about so many different ideas that they may be implemented. Of course, you have to then include them in the future work. Of course, then we have the references. First of all, you have to use the recommended format. Uh, Make sure that not most of your references are URLs. So even if you're using a URL, for instance, you are referring to a Wikipedia page itself is not the source of information. Rather, their sources of information are listed in their references. You must, spend a little bit more time in finding the exact source of the information, and that would be usually a research paper, a journal article, or a book. So if your references are all URLs, it's not a good thing, right? So there are then some tools, automated tools available for reference management. So I have listed some of these. There are very detailed tutorials available on how to use these. I do have some of the very useful slides for these tools. I can share it with you guys later on. So most of these are, for instance, Zotero is free of cost. Of course, you can use them without any license cost, anything. And it's a very useful tool. It helps you to create the references automatically, right? Then we have appendix or appendices. That is the last part of your report. And so what appears here? So if you have, let's suppose, a source code, it's not a good idea that you should include the source code in a chapter. That will be a really bad idea. But it may appear in the appendix, right? If you have some other details, for instance, if you conducted a survey, so of course, it's not a good idea to include what questions were asked on the survey, right? Maybe it was a 3-page survey, questionnaire based survey. So you don't have to include the questionnaire in the chapter. You can include it towards the end of the report as an appendix, right? So, but let me tell you one thing. If you have a very large source code, for instance, thousands of line, and if you print it, it's going to be 100 pages or 50 pages. So it's never a good idea to include that as an appendix. Rather, you can submit that code on a CD or a flash drive, right? All right. So we have a very important section that is some important considerations other than these sections, right? So I didn't talk about some of the things, for instance, the signature page, the table of contents, the list of figures, list of tables, bibliography, and glossary, right? So if you're, of course, the signature page, for instance, you have to know the names of your department head or dean or your supervisor. You have to spell the names correctly, right? So I often see that people sometimes just know the first name of the professor or the last name. They just put the last name or the first name. They don't put the complete name, which is something you should take care of. And then we have table of contents. Of course, they should be created automatically. List of figures, list of tables, same way should be created automatically, right? Bibliography and references are, there's a slight difference. Of course, you will be using references, but you should know what is bibliography. If you are not citing the sources in the chapters and you are just providing a list of sources that you consulted towards the end of the chapter, towards the end of the report, then it's bibliography. But if you're citing the different sources in various chapters and then you're providing a list of all those sources at the end, then it's called references. If you're using a lot of technical terms and you want to have sort of an explanation for those terms, then you can create a glossary, right? All right, so moving on, we have something called transitions. So whenever you are at the end of a chapter and you go to the next page, you suddenly start and notice that there's another chapter has started, right? And there was nothing that talked about the end of the chapter and anything that we are moving to the next chapter. So we have to put something towards the end of every chapter that is called a transition sentence. That in this chapter we discussed XYZ things, and in next chapter we are going to discuss whatever, right? So it's very important. If you have, you must have noticed in all the good books that we read on any topic, whenever we are approaching towards the end of the chapter, the author of the book talks about that, right? And that then he or she transitions to the next chapter, right? So that is basically a smooth transition. So similarly, if if your chapter has multiple sections, you should use these transition sentences, and there should be consistency throughout the document, throughout the report, that you're using the same fonts. If your heading sizes are different, it's not going to have a good impact. You must use the consistent heading sizes, page margins, and so on. And we did talk about how to submit the source code. So these days, you can also provide a link to a repository. So it's not even necessary that you have to include a CD that has source code or a flash drive, unless it's very important, it's something needed by the department. Rather, you can have a GitHub repository. We talked about it, how to create a GitHub repository, and you may have the entire source code there, and anyone with the link can access that public repository. All right, so we have, of course, most of us use Microsoft Word for creating the document, your FYP report document, but of course we have another tool that is called LaTeX. That's also a very good tool that I recommend students to use. So in LaTeX, we have a lot of things that are taken care automatically. For instance, if you're talking about the table of contents, the naming, the numbering of different sections, the references, so they're created very accurately by the tool itself, right? So I think that is something I strongly recommend people, and that's something that's going to help you in your research if you decide to go for a master's degree or later for a doctoral degree, right? So for research writing, it's a very good tool, and there are different editors available for LaTeX. Text Studio is there, TeXworks is there, and then there is a cloud-based solution that is called Overleaf, right, in which you don't have to install anything on your computer. Rather, you just have to create an account and you can create your documents over there. And for reference management, we did talk about these tools earlier. We have EndNote, we have Zotero, we have Mendeley. So these can be used for reference management. All right, now we have some very important guidelines for formatting, right? So pages must be numbered. That's very important. Sometimes we forget to add page numbers, but this is sort of a checklist you should refer to while you're finalizing your document. All right, so someone is trying to paint something on my slides. All right, let me reshare these slides. All right, so then we should have consistent style in text and heading. We did talk about that. All figures must be numbered. It's very important. All figures must be cited in the text, right? It's not enough to just assign a number to a figure. Rather, it's very important to talk about that figure in the text, right? So for instance, figure 2.3 shows whatever that is, and you should discuss that in the text, right? If the figure is not discussed or cited in the text, it means it's maybe it's not needed at all. Why did you include that figure if you're not discussing that in your chapter, right, in the text? Similarly, the table of contents list of figures must be generated automatically, and I know most of you already know this, that how to generate the automated the table of contents automatically in MS Word. So it's very simple steps. If you don't know that, you can of course, Google it, or maybe you can watch a YouTube video that will simply tell you the steps like how to create the table of contents automatically. Similarly, we have um, a common observation. In some cases, the students don't generate the list of figures or list of tables from the new page. It's something recommended that these lists should be generated on the start of the new page, right? Of course, the font sizes and the borders should be consistent. If you're applying borders, be very careful. Like sometimes they don't, just look good when you print, but if your supervisor has still recommended you to go for borders on the pages, then it's fine. And it's very important to understand that we don't have to use bullet points or numbers if we have just one element, right? But if you have two or more elements, then of course you can use bulleted lists or numbered lists. And we also have to add some text before and after the bulleted lists. So for instance, I should at least say the following of the benefits are of the project, and then I should have the bulleted lists that reflect the benefits. And towards the end, I should complete the paragraph by writing some sentence, right? The sections or the chapters must use transitions. We did talk about those. And it continues. So of course we have to use headers and footers, and we have to use it very carefully. Sometimes every chapter is a new section, and we may have section header or footer or both that is applicable to that section only, which means every section or every chapter will have a different header and footer. Footnotes are also possible. So if you think something needs a little bit of explanation, then you can add footnotes. Page numbers, yes, different styles. So one document may have different styles. For instance, we use Roman numbers on the table of contents pages, list of figures, list of tables, and dedication, acknowledgements, abstract. And when we start the next chapter, we stop the Roman numbering, and then we start the usual numbering 1, 2, 3. So, but you should know how to use different page numbers in a document. Line spacing must be consistent, and you must follow the guidelines from the university. If it is like no spacing at all, then it looks a lot messy, but at least you should have a little bit of spacing between the lines. Alignment, of course, is very important. It should be consistent in all the document, throughout the document. Then margins, of course, they are very important. If you're using a watermark of maybe your university logo or something, you must discuss it first with your professor. So once again, borders and shading needs consideration, whether they are necessary to be included or not. Okay, if you are inserting any tables, be careful about the formatting. So of course, MS Word provides a lot of formats for creating tables, but not all the formats look good in the printed document. Sometimes there's a lot of colors involved, but if you're printing it from a black and white printer, of course they might not look as expected, right? So it's better idea to use just black and white colors. So we did talk about the use of colors. So it does not only apply to tables, but also the graphs and the text and the diagrams. All right, so and at some points you may want to include some landscape pages, right? So maybe there's a large table or diagram which has to be on landscape pages. For this, I've seen people that create two different documents. In one document, they have landscape pages and they are manually inserting them before printing, but it's possible to have landscape pages and normal portrait pages in one MS Word document, and that is what you should do as well. All right, so moving on to the last part of the presentation, it's on plagiarism. So let me define the plagiarism first. If you're using someone else's work as your own, or you're using someone else's material inappropriately in your work, for instance, if you're saying that the results achieved by XYZ researchers were not good or were not accurate, rather, but in the actual, I mean, real, they are actually accurate, but you're just saying that they are not accurate, then it's something that will be inappropriate use of others' work. And sometimes you're using some material without providing enough credit to the actual authors, right? So these form the plagiarism, right? And what could be the consequences, and how do we determine the plagiarism? So as per the HEC rules, Higher Education Commission of Pakistan, the 18% similarity or less is allowed. It means you have to paraphrase everything you are including from other sources. The consequences can be bad. So for instance, you may get an F grade on a specific assignment, or you may get F grade in the entire course. I've seen people in Pakistan and abroad in which their degrees were cancelled, or maybe they were expelled or suspended from the university, right? So it's something to be taken care of very seriously. All right, so I think that's all I have. So we can move to the questions and answers that you may have. So let me stop the sharing. All right, so rather I think, stop the recording, and then we can discuss your questions that you may have.